Welcome to another edition of the Parks and Recognized interview series. Thank you for helping us celebrate and recognize the remarkable Parks and Rec pros who foster community spirit, inspire engagement, and ensure that everyone has equal access to parks and wellness activities in their communities. In each episode, we sit down with passionate Parks and Rec pros to explore the crucial work they do, their journey in the Parks and Rec world, and the passion that drives them to do what they do. I'm your host, Atis Mosenipur, VP of Marketing at Xplor Recreation, and today we're doing something a little different. We spent a lot of time recognizing a lot of the agency professionals that support communities across the nation, but today we're giving some well-deserved flowers to someone who supports agency professionals, but isn't one himself. Today I'm joined by Cort Jones, Senior Manager of Digital Content at the NRPA and co-host of the Open Space Radio podcast. Cort, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Datis, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
As am I. You've tuned into a couple of our episodes, so you know the drill. We always kick things off with a bit of an icebreaker question. So my question to you is, what's your favorite non-work related podcast?
I love this question, and I get this question pretty regularly, and I never know how to answer because I feel like I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I don't have like a favorite one. Like I feel like I will seek out a podcast about a topic that I'm trying to learn more about in that moment. But I'll share some that have been some kind of staples for me. So one, I'm a big fan of storytelling. And so there's a podcast called Beautiful Stories from Anonymous People, or Beautiful Anonymous for short. It's hosted by this comedian, Chris Gethard. And the premise is people just call in anonymously to this number that he promotes, and they share a story, and he cannot hang up. They have a conversation for an hour, and he just can't hang up regardless of the topic. He doesn't know this person's name. He doesn't know what the topic is going to be. And it's some of the most powerful stories, because when people can share anonymously and whatever their story is doesn't come back to them and impact, their life or career or whatever it is, they're a little bit more open. And so some really amazing stories on that podcast. I'm a big snowboarder, so I love the Bomb Hole. They talk to professional snowboarders all the time, so
nice.
I love that. And then just a big fan of anything NPR podcast. I love Invisibilia. I love Life Kit, just learning about random things. And then Louder Than a Riot is a really cool podcast about the history of hip hop.
I got to check that one out. I'm a big hip hop fan. And have you heard of the Dissect podcast, actually?
I haven't. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's a really good one. They break down the different lyrics, not just of hip hop, but different genres of music, but predominantly hip hop. It's a really good one to check out if you're a fan of the music.
Yeah, big music fan. So I'll definitely check that out.
Amazing. Well, thanks for sharing that. By the way, how's it feel to be the subject of a podcast rather than the host?
Oh, I mean, there are butterflies. My palms are a little bit sweaty. I'm used to being the one that can just like grill the guest and they have to figure it out. I'm not used to being on this side of it. I think I've been a guest on maybe one or two other podcasts, and that's been years ago. So the nerves are there.
Well, I can empathize with that because it's definitely nerve-wracking for me having somebody of your caliber on the podcast as well. I mean, you've done such an amazing job as the co-host of Open Space Radio, so we really appreciate having you here.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and yeah, thank you for listening to our podcast. That's like my baby and my favorite thing that I get to do at work. So yeah,
it's a great thing y'all are doing. Well, speaking of the podcast, I was listening to an earlier episode in the year about imposter syndrome, and it was a fantastic episode. But in the intro, you talked a little bit about how you feel a sense of imposter syndrome because you're in the Parks and Rec space, but you don't feel that you're truly a Parks and Rec individual because of your background. I mean, first of all, I fully disagree with that. I think what you're doing is incredible and so profoundly impactful for all the advocacy work that you're doing, for all the support that you're providing to Parks and Rec professionals. But for those listening in, why don't we talk a little bit about the work that you do and what organization you do it for?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And yeah, that was one of my favorite episodes with Gabby Vera. She's amazing. Yeah, so I am the senior manager of digital content for the National Recreation and Park Association. That primarily consists of producing and co-hosting our podcast, Open Space Radio. I also manage our blog, which we do a lot of really wonderful storytelling through the blog, sharing context for various NRPA resources and stories from, professionals who are on the ground doing the work. And then I also oversee our social media strategy at NRPA, which, if you're listening and not following NRPA on all of our social platforms, I'd really recommend that. Our social media manager, Christina High, is doing an incredible job.
Definitely.
And then this was the first year that I didn't manage Park and Rec Month. That's been kind of my thing for the past few years. It's transitioned over to another staff member. I was still highly involved, but that's also a big piece that I've been involved with at NRPA, and just one of my favorite campaigns, which we just wrapped up recently.
It's such a great initiative. It's such a great initiative. What inspired you to apply for your first job at the National Recreation and Park Association?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as you mentioned, I don't come from a background in parks and recreation. That's primarily like I have personal experience, but not working in parks and recreation. My background was in journalism. So, I have
Mhm.
formal education in journalism, have worked for a number of different publications and media companies. Um, but I'm also a big fan and advocate for outdoor recreation. I'm always trying to find something to do outside. Really love nature. And so when I saw a job position open up for an associate editor for Parks and Recreation magazine, I was like, this sounds like the perfect marriage between my love of writing and journalism and my love of nature. And so um, I applied. Luckily, they liked my writing samples, and and I got it. And I've transitioned from the magazine team, kind of got into communications, and now I'm on the digital content
Yes.
side. But yeah, I think um, doing my research into NRPA when I was applying for the job, I was like, this seems like such a wonderful organization. I hadn't heard of NRPA before seeing this job opportunity, and so luckily they took a chance on me, and I think it's paid off, and it's been one of the most rewarding careers I've ever had, and I think it's definitely my favorite job that I've ever had. Yeah, so I love it, and I'm so glad that I found this opportunity, found this organization, and it's provided me so many opportunities, and I've met so many amazing people and made built a lot of relationships that I wouldn't have otherwise had.
That's a really special part about working at least adjacent to the industry or part of the industry is the relationships you build. It really is all about community, and it's a really special breed of folks that we get to work with.
Absolutely.
Well, it's really fortunate. I mean, I think we're all fortunate that they did take that chance on you and that they did enjoy your writing style because just the impact you've had has been really incredible to watch and witness. So prior to getting into the NRPA, you didn't really had you known much about the industry outside of just reaping some of the benefits of it?
Yeah, I think you said it. Like, I think I was reaping the benefits of it, but I didn't truly know or appreciate the full scope. I grew up playing sports and going to camp and going to the pool every day in the summer. And, I was participating in a lot of these programs without, probably like my parents probably knew that I was participating in Parks and Rec programs, but I didn't know it at the time.
Right.
Um, and as I said, spend a lot of time outdoors on trails and going to the skate park and snowboarding and things like that. So I was, I guess, adjacently familiar with the industry, but I really didn't appreciate the full scope and everything that happens, or the importance of local park and recreation professionals until I joined NRPA, and I think that really opened my eyes in the best way, because I think my perspective was probably like a lot of people in our communities who don't truly
Mhm.
understand the value of parks and recreation. And um, so I think it switched that thing in my mind where it was like, this is not a nice to have, it's essential. Like it truly is. And I feel like it's hard to see
Mhm.
that until you're in the industry or adjacent to the industry. And so I think that speaks to the opportunity that we can take advantage of to advocate for the importance of parks and recreation to our community members.
I couldn't agree more with you, Cort. It's such a special industry, and so much goes into supporting what we as community members just kind of get to reap the benefits on a day-to-day basis. Being back in the industry, especially as a father, has really, really emphasized my appreciation of the Parks and Rec industry and the oftentimes tireless and unfortunately thankless work that goes to support what us and other community members get to enjoy daily.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think you said it, like it's a lot of times we don't understand as just like the regular community member, don't understand what goes into putting on these programs, keeping these spaces clean and safe and welcoming. Like a lot of times we think that these spaces just appear and they take care of themselves. And it's not true. There are people that are working really hard to maintain these spaces and offer these programs. And um, so, yeah, I think the more that we can shout that out, that it's the people behind all of these things that are making it happen, the better off we will be.
Couldn't agree more. Parks and Rec pros, in my opinion, just kind of as we discussed just now, are really a special breed of people. And I really believe that they are the heartbeat of communities everywhere. I'm sure you do as well. What does community specifically mean to you, Court?
So I really love this question because I think community can mean so many different things and it means so many
Hmm.
different things to different people, depending on where you are, your lived experience. And um, I think community can sometimes be a tricky thing to define because of that.
Hmm.
Aside from the literal like community as a physical place definition,
Yes.
to me, community is all about, support and love and belonging among a group of people with shared values. Um, and sometimes not even shared values. Maybe it's differing values, but how you bring people in to see what's valued by each individual of this community. Um, I think to me, community is more human centered than location centered.
Yes.
Um, it's all about, the people who are there for you, who see you and hear you, who you can rely on when you need something or when they need something, they can rely on you. I see community every Saturday morning when I go to my local farmers market and I see everyone catching up. Everyone like I live in a pretty small town, so people know your name like when you go up to their
Hmm.
booth and they remember what you got last time. And um, I see community when my neighbors brought my wife and I meals after we had our son, a few months ago. I see community when I go to the local coffee shop and the barista and I carry on a conversation that we started last week or the day before or whatever, and they know my order, we know each other. um, I see it when I can connect with someone who has a similar lived experience as I do. You know we all have our own lived experiences, but when you can connect with someone on a commonality there, I think that's community. um, it's a lot of things, I think, but at the end of the day it revolves around people and connection. And I think there's not just one community that anyone can be a part of. You can be part of various communities, and I just think community is a beautiful thing, and it's very personal to everyone, I think.
Love that answer. And this is always such a fascinating question for me to ask on these episodes that we do. And I love getting the perspective of somebody who's not directly in the agency space, but it's so cool to see how it overlaps with so many of the responses we've got from other agency professionals. I really like the point that you touched on. I think values obviously play into community, but also not necessarily having the same values, but connecting over similar interests. I think to me is a really fascinating part of community where values may differ, opinions may differ, but there's a shared love for something in common. I think that's so special too. And when I look at your involvement in community, your supporting these community catalysts in the Parks and Recreation space, but you're supporting at this almost macro level where you're having a hand in creating advocacy for these individuals that are building community across the nation and continent. Can you tell me a little bit about what community kind of means to you from that lens of the work that you specifically do?
Yeah, and I think you kind of said it just a minute ago when you were talking about the differences and how community can bring that together. I think that's a big part of our work at NRPA, and especially our equity work. I think our chief equity officer, Autumn Saxon Ross, always loves to say difference meets on the playground. And when we're thinking about parks and recreation, like that is such a bipartisan issue, or it should be, when we're thinking about recreation and protecting these spaces that are beneficial to all of our lives and our health and well-being. It's a bipartisan issue in a world that is not currently, there are not very many bipartisan issues in the world right now. And so I think in my work, it's being able to showcase community and showcase how differences can come together in spaces like this, and how these programs and spaces are welcoming to everyone, regardless of your background, your experience, your ability. And so I think building community through my work is being able to facilitate conversations where people can advocate and share the important ways that they're doing that and the way that they're building community. And so I feel like, especially with the podcast, we've built kind of a community for communities. And so I just love being able to amplify the good work that's going on and the true community building that's happening across the country. And then I think that in turn builds a community within like NRPA of all of these people who are doing similar work across the country and lifting up their communities. So I hope that answered your question.
It sure did, and it's quite meta if you think about it.
Yeah.
Community supporting communities within communities.
Yeah, 100%. It's super meta.
I know you're a very humble-natured individual, but I want you to talk a little bit about your impact and maybe a couple highlights in your career and why they were so special to you.
Well, I appreciate that question. Yeah, I think these are sometimes the hardest ones for me to answer, because I think I look at this work as not about me. I'm kind of just the catalyst to, provide the platform and give the space. But there are definitely some highlights. I think the biggest one for me was right at the beginning when I started at NRPA in 2017. It was right before the 2017 NRPA annual conference in New Orleans. And so that, I think, was like the defining moment for me when I started at NRPA. I wasn't interacting with our members as much, and I wasn't like, I was kind of behind the scenes. And so going to that first conference, I finally saw like thousands of park and rec professionals come together, and just seeing the energy and the commitment to service, and just hearing everyone talk about the work that they were doing just opened my mind up so much. And so that was, I think, a whirlwind, a little overwhelming. I was taking in a lot of information, but just the energy of that conference, it made me realize that I was in the right industry. I was working for the right organization, and that it was something that I wanted to be a part of. As you know, and you've said it, park and recreation professionals are some of the most amazing individuals I've ever met. I've been in a few different industries, and there's nothing like this one. And so being a part of that was like, oh, I want to contribute to this how I can, whether that's from the national like supporting level or whatever it was, like I just want to be a part of it. And so I think that was a big highlight for me. Obviously, I think launching the podcast when we did, my previous co-host Roxanne Sutton, our supervisor at the time, came to us and was like, we should start a podcast or something. And we were like, okay, we could probably do that. Neither of us have done this before. I have a little bit of, video and audio editing experience from a
Mm,
previous role. And so I think leadership was like, oh, that translates into creating a podcast. This will be perfect. And they wanted us to host it. And we were like, all right, we'll do it. We'll explore this. And we went to a couple podcast conferences, and then we just kind of got to work, and we launched the podcast in 2017 as well. And that, I think, has been one of my proudest projects that I've been a part of at the organization. We've gone through a lot of changes. I was with
mm.
my original co-host, then I was hosting and producing solo for a while. And now I have two co-hosts, Christina High and Kara Myers, which has been amazing to get like those additional perspectives from the hosting side. And I feel like I'm not doing it, all on my own. But yeah, just seeing the response to the podcast and the fact that people actually listen. And when I get an email about this episode really resonated with me, or when I get a message from one of our guests who we were talking about um, some wildfires that had impacted their community. This was
Mm.
a couple years back, and they were able to use our interview to go and get a grant to be able to
Oh,
help
wow.
with recovery efforts. And so to be a part of something like that in just our little platform is like truly helping others amplify their work and then make a case for better funding or better resources or what have you. That's makes me really proud. And just being able to create space for others to share stories when they might not have otherwise had the opportunity, I think
Mm.
is something that I value a lot. And so I think that's been a really proud few years for me with the podcast, and it's been fairly successful. We've been on, charts for Apple Podcasts every now and then,
Wow.
and so that's always cool. Like that, we're not in it for the charts, we're not in it for the ratings or what have
Course.
you, but it's nice to see when the content that we're producing is resonating. Um, and then Park and Rec Month, I think
Mm.
I led Park and Rec Month for about 4 years, up until this year when it transitioned to another staff member. And there's a whole lot of work going on behind the scenes for a campaign like Park and
Of
Rec
course.
Month. And it can get stressful. It can get overwhelming. It's a lot. But then when July 1st hits and you get on like Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, and you just see everyone celebrating, it's like the most amazing feeling. Like this is something that we worked so hard, and now everyone's excited and they're doing the thing. That's always amazing. And really seeing all of this work on the community level unified under one
Mhm.
central theme. Like our theme was where you belong this year, and so we were
Yes.
really leaning into the belonging. And just seeing how many agencies that resonated with and how many were supporting that theme and really building belonging in their community is always cool. And then I think one last thing, part of Park and Rec Month is Park and Recreation Professionals Day.
Yes.
And so that I think uh, I think it was 2019, and I'm sorry if I get the date wrong and the person who came to us is listening, but uh, Tim Hurd, from the CEO from the Pennsylvania Recreation and Park Society, came to us and was like, "Hey, I was on a trail the other day, thinking about how we need to have a Park and Recreation Professionals Day to honor the folks who are doing this work." And he's like, "We did one in Pennsylvania. It was a really great idea. We would love to take it, nationwide." And so we were like, yeah, this sounds like a really awesome idea. Let's try to do it. So we recorded a podcast with him. He talked about the day. And then we created some simple materials for folks to be able to get involved and promote the day. And to see the response from that first year and then to see what Park and
Mhm.
Recreation Professionals Day was like this year, it was like everyone was talking about it. Everyone was celebrating their staff and doing special events and having, parties and luncheons and all this stuff. And it's really cool to see something go from like idea to really impactful campaign. I think is always really rewarding to be a part of something like that. And I think at this point it's just like it's carrying itself forward because
Yes.
it was a really solid start. And so it's just been really fun to watch.
No shortage of things to be proud of, and I'm sure there's many
Yeah.
more. But thank you for sharing that, and thank you again for just all that you do to advocate for these Parks and Rec professionals that impact all our lives so significantly. And I love that bit about the Parks and Rec Professionals Day. I think I've got a message in my inbox from Tim about Parks and Rec Professionals Day that I've got to get to. But it's so special that we're that you folks are giving that platform to these professionals. I think goes such a long way because they're really unsung heroes in a lot of ways. Again, we talked about it a few times how folks don't necessarily know the work that goes into managing our parks and recreational programs. And the other thing that they don't necessarily, or the average person doesn't necessarily know, is all the extra work that Parks and Rec
Mm.
professionals do. So many of the folks that I speak to volunteer in either statewide associations or branches within those statewide associations. Uh, a lot of them are involved with the NRPA. And then, of course, they have their own lives, families, kids, all that. So they're juggling so much. But we don't know that. We don't see that unless we're directly involved. So to give that platform, to give that recognition, I think is just one of many ways you folks are really doing a great job of advocating for Parks and Rec professionals.
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, I agree. Like the commitment to service doesn't just stop with their day job as a park and recreation professional in their local community.
It does
They're
not.
truly committed to service, and I think it's so admirable.
It really is. It really is. And you touched on something about the first annual conference that you attended. It was that really eye-opening moment for you. What really surprised you about this industry that's different than previous industries you worked in?
I think the willingness to share. I think the collaboration, and especially when we, talking about NRPA membership, like things like NRPA Connect, which is our, platform, like message board platform for members where they can share ideas, best practices, things that have
Mm,
happened in their community that they're navigating. And someone from an entirely different community across the country may have gone through something similar and they can share
yes.
how they got through it. And I feel like that's really unique to this industry because there's a lot of similar work going on, but it's very dependent on the community and the needs of that community. And so there's a lot of different work happening in communities across the country, but just the willingness to share that work and share resources and collaborate on solutions to things. Um, and just, I mean, it's absolutely the most fun group of professionals that I've encountered in any industry. Um, the journalism industry is not this fun. Um, so yeah, I think just that willingness to share and openness to collaboration and just that commitment to service, I think is so incredible that you don't see that in every industry.
You really don't. That service component, it's the root of everything Parks and Rec professionals do.
I'll also add the welcomeness. And I don't even know if welcomeness is a word, but just the welcoming nature of park and recreation professionals. I think, I've mentioned the
Yes.
fact that I was not in this industry previous to this role, but I feel like I've been embraced by any of the professionals that I've had to reach out to and work directly with on certain things or talk to on the podcast. It's like I may not be a, quote unquote park and recreation professional, but I feel like I've been, you know, accepted into the group, and welcomed. And so I think that's also um says a lot about the type of people that park and recreation professionals are.
Yes.
Like I don't feel like an outsider. I don't feel like, just the nonprofit association guy for this industry that's not a part of it. I truly feel like I'm a part of the industry, and that's not my own feeling. Like that's because of the way that I've been welcomed and embraced
Yes.
and um, and just engaged with. So I think that's pretty amazing.
I full-heartedly agree on that as well. I I have friendships that I know will stand the test of time just through people I've met on these different trips, going to trade shows, being at the NRPA annual conference. I have a lot of people that I text with fairly regularly that I've met in the year and a half that I've been back in this industry. They really, truly do welcome everybody and anybody into the industry, and it's that whole nature of community. Uh, it's a special thing.
Yeah, the it comes right back around to the community, right? It's an amazing community.
Full circle. Hey, Cort, obviously you spend a lot of time with the podcast. You do a lot of work advocating for Parks and Rec professionals, always having a profound impact. But when you're not busy doing all these things, what can we expect you to be doing with your spare time?
Well, my answer today is a little different than it was maybe 5 months ago. Right now, I'm like full blown babyland dad life. I have a 5 month
Yes.
old son. So a lot of diaper changes, a lot of
Uh-huh.
things like that. But it's amazing. I love it. So yeah, I mean, spending as much time as I can with my wife and son. Um, Listening to a lot of like peaceful piano music because my son really loves piano music. um,
Amazing.
aside from that, I love to read. I love to get outside. We're really fortunate to have a lot of really wonderful spaces and trails right in our town. So we're able to get our son in nature from an early age, which is really cool.
Yes.
Um, I love to cook. That's, a big hobby of mine. So always looking for like new recipes. I love watching trash TV. Like I love substance. I love I love a good like documentary, but like give me some trash reality TV and I can dissociate for hours with that. So
No way.
um and then I love skateboarding when I get the chance to. I am so excited to teach my son how to skateboard. Datis, you sent me a really cool skateboard trainer thing that I've got in my cart. It's ready to go whenever he's ready. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so really just anything with family, friends outside, or I also can, be a huge homebody too.
Fair enough. Fair enough. When you spend so much time in community, it's nice to have some of that downtime to yourself as well, and maybe catch up on some trash TV.
Yeah.
I did not expect that.
I know.
And you
I
said,
feel like I always surprise people when I tell them like, yeah, I'm a big Bravo fan. And they're like, really? I didn't take you for a Bravo fan. I'm like, yeah, it's, guilty pleasure, but I don't know if it's that guilty of a pleasure at this point. Like I'm all about it.
wear it proudly. My partner, she's all about that, and that's when the AirPods go in. We're not so aligned on that one.
Well, you might break down soon though, because that's how it started in
Oh
our
yeah,
house. So yeah, I mean, you never know. Don't discount it yet.
never say never.
Yeah.
Well, Court, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Before I wrap things up, I do want to ask actually two more questions. One, is there any exciting news you'd like to share about the NRPA to those tuning in today?
Yeah. So, as you know, we just wrapped up Park and Recreation Month at the end of July, and we'll be carrying that theme of where you belong into our 2024 annual conference, which is
Mm,
happening in Atlanta this year on October 8th through 10th. So, really excited about that. Really excited to get down to Atlanta, see everybody, catch up. The conference is always just such an energizing, refreshing time of the year. I think it's getting to that, end of summer, early fall. Everyone's starting to like feel it, and then you go to conference, and then you're like, okay, I'm energized to do this work again.
yes.
So really looking forward to that. If you haven't registered, I would really encourage you to do so. We're also going to be unveiling our new strategic plan at the conference. So a lot of excitement there. We have some exciting partners that we're going to be announcing at conference. Um, as well as NRPA's 60th anniversary celebration in
Woohoo.
2025. So we're gearing up for that. So a lot of fun ideas floating around on our marketing team currently about how we're going to celebrate that. But I know we're going to have some really fun stuff, just celebrating the impact that NRPA and the park and recreation profession has had over the last 60 years. So yeah, I think those are the big ones. And I'll always shout out Open Space Radio. We've got a lot of great episodes coming out. We've
Absolutely.
got a lot of episodes in 2025 already planned to support the strategic plan. So, yeah, I think a lot of exciting stuff to come. It's our busy time right now with Park and Rec month wrapping up and conference about to
Yes.
start. So, yeah, a lot of good things to come.
Lots of exciting stuff, lots to celebrate. 60 years. Wow. Well, we'll make sure if there's anything else, we'll make sure to drop links into the page that we post this on, and any socials that we share through. So thanks for sharing all that. My final question that I've got for you before we wrap things up, as somebody who's, let's say, adjacent, even though you're not, but as somebody who's adjacent to the Parks and Rec profession, what advice would you share to Parks and Rec professionals who are listening in?
Yeah, I think this is one of those questions where I get that imposter syndrome because I'm like, I sometimes feel a certain way about giving advice in
Mm,
a profession that I haven't personally, worked on the ground in. But I think I've had the unique perspective of hearing a lot of professionals give advice to other professionals. And so I can share, at least some of that. And I think, the biggest one is to just get involved. I think whether that's with NRPA and our various volunteer opportunities or networks, or your state association, or just getting more involved on the local level. I know we talked about that a few minutes ago, just, how
yes.
involved park and recreation professionals are on so many different levels. And so I think just getting involved, um, like time and energy is the biggest resource that we don't have capacity on. And so I think like getting involved in, helping out with your state association or NRPA is a really good way to expand your network, get some
Yes.
experience, and so I would always recommend that. Um, and then using your network and peers in the profession as a resource. I think
Hmm.
it's always really easy to get stuck in your own silo. Um, but getting those outside perspectives and experience from others who may have gone through a similar situation in their community, I think, is invaluable. Um, And then I would also always recommend using NRPA's resources. We have toolkits for just about everything. We have,
Hmm.
a lot of really great research reports, our magazine with some, really valuable articles, the podcast.
Yes.
There's something for just about anyone working in parks and recreation if they're looking for content or resources on a specific topic. They can probably find it through NRPA. And I know there's a lot of other organizations that have similar resources. So there's just there's so many resources available. It's just, finding which ones are relevant for your work. And so I would just explore those opportunities with, NRPA or your state association, and attend the conference. Talk to somebody who you don't know,
Hmm.
we recently published a blog post on our blog about Megan Kuehl's conference experience, and she said, when you're there, look to your left or right, introduce yourself, like just just saying hi. Like, I get really nervous in social situations, and it's like sometimes difficult for me to just go up to someone and introduce myself, but like getting out of your comfort zone and doing that, I
Yes.
think, is so valuable. And I've seen the value and I've been able to do that. And so I always
Hmm.
encourage others to like give yourself grace and like try to do it. Like, don't force yourself to do it, obviously, but if the opportunity is there to introduce yourself and learn about somebody new and what they're doing in the field, take that opportunity and say hi and learn about somebody.
That's great advice, and especially at conferences where folks are there to meet other professionals and learn from others and have conversations with others and grow their communities. It's really, for anyone, that's the best environment where your guard should be the lowest for something like that because everyone's expecting it already and there for that purpose.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's what I continued to tell myself as I was in those situations. Like, look, everyone's here for the same goal, the same mission. Like everyone wants to just better their community here. And so if you go into it thinking that, like the other person's probably nervous to say hi too, but at the end of the day, like they want to make their community a better place. You want your community to be a better place. And when you talk about that together and connect on that, that doubles the impact, right? And then, there's just that trickle down effect, and hopefully the impact continues to grow, and you get to grow your network, you get to have more resources and people that you can go to, and then hopefully some of your problems are a little bit easier to solve when you have others that you can consult.
So true. Great advice, Cort. Well, this has been really special. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Uh, Definitely was able to feel a little bit more comfortable as we went along the podcast. I think your hosting experience made it more comfortable for me as the host. So thank you for that. Hopefully we can get some time together at conference. I know you'll be super busy, but I really hope to meet you in person there. And thanks again for everything that you do, the advocacy that you do, and NRPA as an organization, all that you do for the folks in the Parks and Rec profession.
Well, thanks so much, Datis. And yeah, I mean, my nerves, I think, started to subside at the end. I probably started rambling a little bit, but hopefully it's all coherent. And yeah, I would absolutely, encourage anyone listening to go register for the conference. And yeah, I can't wait to meet you in person and connect there. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about my experience and what NRPA can offer to professionals in the field.
Thank you, Cort. See you soon.
All right, thanks, Datis.